Welcome to this month's version of our monthly Lyceum. I'm Jim Trouson, the mayor of our little town. So thankful, Marnie, to you for being here today. Marnie is the president of, Power to the Patients, and you're going to hear more about this. Uh, but I met her years ago. I went to where she lives in Florida, Winter Park, and had a great conversation because at that time, MedMan, our practice management company, was a member of AID, Association of Independent Doctors. So I really liked what she was doing then as the executive director, and we were partnering with her to try to support the idea that you don't have to sell your soul to a hospital. You could be an independent doctor, and she was really the megaphone for that movement there. So that was pretty neat, and that's how I got to know Marty. And so, Marty, would you tell us about your life here? And I want you to digress a little bit, Marty, if you would, about all the non healthcare stuff that you do. You're a syndicated uh, lifestyle columnist. You've written 7 books. It really has such to me, an ideal life. Uh, you've been a health reporter for the LA Times. So, Marty, tell us about your journey. What all do you do? And we'd like to live through you a little bit here.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Jim, and thank you all for being here. At the risk of sounding mildly schizophrenic, Jim is right. I do lead 2 lives, and I have I came out upon both of them honestly, and I just continue in both tracks. But I am a journalist by training. I did work for the LA Times. I was a health reporter, and I reported in lifestyle section and in real estate. I just didn't do sports as a public service. And I, wrote a lot of different things and was interested in all of them. I eventually became the senior health reporter at the Orlando Sentinel when I moved to Florida. The Orlando Sentinel and the LA Times were at the time both owned by Tribune Media, so it was a sister kind of handoff. And I learned a lot about healthcare while I was in that role, more about, I used to be more consumer health, like healthy lifestyle and diet and exercise. And I became more about the business of healthcare when I came to the Orlando Sentinel. If you know anything about Orlando Metro, we're the 26th largest metro. We're behind Austin. We're sort of a Midland-sized metro, but we have 2 of the largest nonprofit health systems in the country, Advent Health and Orlando Health are both within a few miles of each other, and they're pretty dominant, and they can be disruptive in this environment. So I was reporting on that. In other news, there were 2 CPAs in the area who were concerned about the acquisition of independent doctors by those 2 big hospitals and what the downstream effects were to patients. And these particular CPAs had a small firm, and they represented over 100 physician practices. So they were seeing the impacts that this was having on the physicians' bottom lines and their morale and what have you. So they wanted to start a trade association, the Association of Independent Doctors, and asked me to come and cover it. It was on the front page of the Orlando Sentinel. It got shared, and their association grew to a couple hundred members. And they asked me to dinner about a year later. I thought they wanted more media coverage, which is why I usually get asked to dinner. But no, in fact, they wanted me to be the executive director of this newly formed association. And I was looking at the Orlando Sentinel, where I had withstood 4 layoffs and not seen a raise in the near future. I was a single mother of 2 daughters in college, and I thought this might not be a bad idea. So I made the leap
Yeah.
and became executive director. And ironically, and maybe sadly, and I don't want to ruffle feathers here. You know, we're going to talk about things that may hit a little close to home, but the fact is, I was being constrained in my reporting and the harder reporting I wanted to do about the two large monopolies or the duopoly in our community, about the lack of charitable care, about the excessive compensation to CEOs based on the fact that they're both nonprofits. And I was squelched by the publisher both times from reporting on this because of advertising. So even though, I understand that I want hospitals to survive and I want newspapers to survive, but this was a conflict for me of conscience. So at the Association of Independent Doctors, we had 5 missions. It was just me and an assistant and our members. And it was price transparency, getting site neutral payments, and enforcing antitrust law, and exposing the abuse and correcting the abuse of the tax exempt status by nonprofit hospitals. And I'm forgetting one more. Oh, stopping the consolidation of stopping hospitals from acquiring physicians' practices. So this is like straight uphill every day, no oxygen. Oh, and by the way, I was supposed to also continue to shake down my members to pay their $500 a month so we could continue to keep the boat afloat. Well, this became a recipe for burnout. And 7 years in, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm DONE done. Hospitals continue to, acquire the doctors, and I'm struggling. So I really wasn't feeling super satisfied. Although the mission was important to me. And along the way, right at that kind of crucial moment, in fact, it was right about, I can tell you, it was April of 2019. I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal. I just came across it yesterday. This is a powerful lobbying tool in the Trump era. Well, this sounds really, like super old news, and it is. But it was an article about a woman named Cynthia Fisher. She's also extremely smart, and she understood healthcare, and she understood the business and with the blood banking industry. And she said she realized that there was something was very, very amiss, and she wanted to see hospital prices operate and the hospital healthcare industry operate like every other industry, with transparency and consumers knowing the price of their service or care or product before they get it. She didn't have a party. She wanted, whoever won in the White House, she wanted to have a seat at the table. And when Trump won that election that year in 2016, she was invited to Mar-a-Lago with other CEOs to talk about what would make America great. I read this Wall Street Journal article about Cynthia, and I wrote her an email, and I said, I'm interested in price transparency. I run this association. Let me know how I can help. And I told her I was ready for a change. And well, before I told her that, she said, yes, you can help me write a letter to President Trump and tell him why we need healthcare price transparency, and maybe get some doctors to sign it. So we co-wrote a letter that was hand-delivered and put on President Trump's desk. And we had 4,000 doctors sign it, all on behalf of aid. So we got it on Trump's desk. This article came out in the Wall Street Journal, April 17th of 2019. In June of 2019, we had the executive order for healthcare price transparency signed by President Trump. And then the hospital industry sued the American Hospital Association, and others in the hospital industry sued HHS for these rules, twice lost. We got them for deal. And then they hoped and prayed that when Biden came and Biden won the election in 2020, that he would reverse everything Trump did. But guess what? This was a bipartisan issue, and President Biden upheld everything Trump had did, and in fact made it a little stronger, saying that we also need to amp up competition. So we have a bipartisan rule. However, at this point, Cynthia had been tarred as a Trumper, and it was very unpopular for her. And of course, the industry, who wasn't in favor of this transparency, was pushing her away and saying, oh, she's in the Trump camp. So she swung radically left, and she started Power to the Patients, a very left-leaning, as it would appear, or really bipartisan association. He got Susan Sarandon as a spokesperson. We got Shepard Fairey, who did the Obama Hope posters, as our graphic artist. We went to the streets. I say we, I wasn't part of them. I just knew what she was doing. I was still running aid. And we got murals put up in big cities about power to the patients, get to the people. We have hip hop artists who've come in and, given power for the voice to people of the streets. While she's running patient rights advocates on a policy level, she has this other organization going on. When I told her I was leaving aid, she offered to buy it and have me continue to run it. And I refused. I said, no, we don't want your money. I am done with this. I am done with this. And so I shut everything down on December 1st of 2021. It was 12 months after the price transparency law took effect. And on December 4th, she called me and asked me if I would be president of Power to the Patients. I was planning my retirement. I was going to get my tennis game back and take up oil painting, but here I am.
I do have some questions for you, Marni. That the PR that you're doing is awfully interesting, and so you're using the hip hops, other stars. There's the raised fists. So it's a little bit in your face, and you have one of your taglines is estimates are bullshit. So it's awfully interesting to me how you are getting actually quite a bit of attention there. Can you tell us about that a little bit? Is it because you needed to go from Trump to Biden and maybe get a little more in your face?
Well, Power to the Patients and patient rights advocates, we are two sides of the same coin, and we have the same founder. This is a widely bipartisan effort. So PRA works on the policy, governmental level. We're getting laws passed in the states, and we're pushing legislation on the Hill. And I'm working with the patient on the streets, and my patient journalism background, health journalism background, helps me identify with the real people and bridge that. So, okay. So, we aren't asking for money because we don't stand to profit from this. Only every single American will if we bring down the price of healthcare and make it more accessible and affordable for everyone. It'll benefit every sector, really, because healthcare is such a big part of the bottom line of every business and also our tax dollars. So, all right, that was my intro, such as it was. And just in other news, I do, because I was interested in real estate and I was writing home decor columns, not that I'm a designer, I just like pretty houses. I started writing a column when I was in California for a newspaper there. When I moved from California to Denver before I moved to Orlando, they canceled the column, but serendipitously, I got picked up by Tribune Media to be nationally syndicated as a home design columnist. And that was 20 years ago. I'm not with Tribune anymore. I'm self-syndicated, and that has spun off 7 books: Downsizing the Family Home, Downsizing the Blended Home, The House Always Wins, The House of Havoc, What to Do with Everything You Own to Leave the Legacy You Want, and as of January, Right Size Today for Your Best Life Tomorrow. So if you Google me and I'm holding a paintbrush or a box of household junk, you'll understand. Well, I am the same person.
All right. Well, and I want to segue over to some of the points that you brought up that we could take home today. So why is healthcare pricing at a tipping point? You want to talk about that a little bit, Marni?
Yeah. You probably have the facts at hand, but as you know, healthcare, the cost of healthcare has gone up way faster than the cost of inflation, and it is becoming painful. It's a point of pain for it's 20% of our gross national product, and it needs to get checked out. We need to get back into check. So we have these laws afoot that there is low compliance on. But if there were better compliance, things could change. We believe that when prices are transparent, patients would be empowered to shop for the best care at the best price, and they could get a colonoscopy for $1,000 instead of $4,000, or an MRI for $300 instead of $3,500, if they could only see that there was this price variation and that they have a choice of a lower cost provider. So we think that once the curtain is pulled back on all prices, as the current hospital price transparency rule requires, and I can get a little bit more into that in a minute, that competition would kick in. And right now we have a very dysfunctional market because there is no price competition, and patients cannot see the price of their care before they get it or before they get a bill. That's non-negotiable because they can't return their gallbladder once it's taken out. So we just think that would cause competition to come in, and we believe we want hospitals to survive. We want hospitals to make money. We want good profits, but we believe that, like every other industry, they can figure out what the cost of delivering the care is, put in a profit margin, and charge the same price. We have seen through some of our studies price variation within the same hospital of up to 10 times, and within a state up to 30 times. It's quite a difference. So imagine you're paying $1 for a loaf of bread, and somebody else is paying $30 for that same loaf of bread. That is just not acceptable. So we need price transparency and market function the way every other sector of our economy works. And I believe that there is getting to be quite a groundswell of people that are pretty angry about this, to the point now where, well, 94% of American voters want to know the price of their care before they get it. We think the other 6% work in the industry, and maybe there's somebody in this little chat room, but we're not going to find anything.
Mhm.
So we think it's time. Americans are getting fed up. 100 million Americans, that's about 1 in 3, is in significant medical debt. And it's a leading cause of bankruptcy. Medical debt is leading cause of bankruptcy in this country. So wages have been stagnant because more and more of workers' wages have been going to pay for health insurance premiums as opposed to their wage. And in the past 10 years, in one union, I have this number, healthcare has risen 17% as a part of total competition in 10 years, from 17% to 37% of their total compensation is now going for healthcare. Wages have gone up 54%, but healthcare costs have increased 230%. So they're not getting, even though they may be getting pay increases, it's getting eaten up by healthcare premiums. So that's why we're at a tipping point. Americans are over this, fed up, burning out, breaking down. Employers can't grow. They can't be competitive on the international market because we're twice, our healthcare system costs twice as much as the next developed country. So it's time for change. So, and we think it's happening, and we have some good legislative bills in the works that we think could really cause this to change.
Well, and Marni, let me circle back around to hospital consolidations, integration, acquiring of the medical practices, of facility fees and all that. So do you have any feeling about what that does to prices when a doctor's office is acquired by a hospital, or when these hospital systems consolidate to get better rates, for example? How's that working out for us?
Well, the studies continue to show that consolidation only drives prices up, not down, and it creates a lot of pretty impenetrable market power. That said, I like to think of transparency as a big sunshine on top of a pyramid, and it shines the light on prices, which then shines the light on facility fees. So if a patient goes, why would I go here and pay all this in facility fees when I can go to an independent doctor's practice or independent imaging center or a freestanding outpatient surgical center and forego these hefty facility fees? I'm going to go here. When hospitals have to start competing on price, they have to start adjusting the price of their care to compete with what's left of the independent market or other providers. The prices will start coming down, and maybe the other providers' prices can start coming up a little bit. But I think what will happen, and maybe I'm, too idealistic, but I think that hospitals will start to divest themselves of the acquisitions that they've made because the facility fees will have to get reduced, and they will start losing the profit margin they make off of the backs of these doctors that they've acquired. So I was just seeing an article, I didn't read it, the headline was too sad, but it says, why are doctors making less? And it's really horrible that they're getting burned out and they're getting acquired, and the hospitals are scrunching them down, asking them to do more and squeezing their wages. So, and independent doctors are being hurt even further. So I do think that this will start to expose, price transparency will begin to expose the ills of consolidation. It'll introduce market power. It will empower patients. It will create competition in the market. It will expose the abuse of the tax-exempt status by nonprofit hospitals, so people will start scratching their heads and going, wait, how come they're putting liens on all these people's houses, but they're technically nonprofit? Aren't they supposed to be providing charitable care commensurate with the taxes that they're not paying? That's going to come out. So I think that we have an interesting few years ahead.
Marnie, are you folks predicting that there's going to be disintegration in our healthcare systems, that hospitals will start spinning off their own physician practices then?
That's my point of view. I haven't, this is, we're really laser focused on price transparency. We don't, it affects other things like consolidation, but we don't get into that argument so much. But I just believe that a good business decision would be, gee, if I have this practice that I now cannot layer in all these facility fees on top of, because I have to make sure this practice is competitive with other independent practices in the community, then maybe it's not worth my while to keep it. Maybe it's better off if we, coexist, but we don't own each other. I think it could happen.
Okay, well, then the other point is estimates. Your website talks a lot about those. So why are estimates bullshit?
That wasn't my language, but I do get a little thrill every time I see that commercial. Well, so when the healthcare price transparency rule went into effect in 2021, at the 11th hour, you probably are familiar with this, but for context, it requires two different postings of prices. There's the machine readable file that they require hospitals to post the shoppable services by payer and by plan, and the charge master price and the discounted cash price and the lowest negotiated rate and the highest negotiated rate. Okay, all that's supposed to be exposed in the machine readable file. So ideally, the reason we have these machine readable files is so high-tech aggregators like those who create Uber and Amazon and all that can get all access to all these prices and put it on an app that you can use on your phone. Okay, separately, there is the consumer-facing tool that allows consumers to see, and ideally, our wish was see by payer and plan all of the same prices in a more consumer-friendly format. In the final rule that went into effect, the administration allowed for an estimator tool to be used in lieu of a consumer-facing shoppable grid of prices. So the machine readable file is still supposed to be there, but meanwhile, consumers can just plug in their name, that they need a tonsillectomy, here's their insurance, and they get an estimate. Okay, there are many reasons there's a problem with this. One, every single estimator tool I've ever seen has this qualified language. This is an estimate, your price could be more, it could be less. It may or may not include important services like pathology, radiology, therapies, post-op, pre-op, whatever. It's not a good number. It also doesn't allow for patients to shop and compare their plan's negotiated rate against all the other ones to see if Blue Cross is getting a deal after all, or maybe they should be with Cigna. Who knows? And so, or maybe I should pay the cash price, which is often 40% of the time the cash price is lower than the lowest negotiated rate. So maybe I should just pay cash, especially if it's November and I have a $10,000 deductible. So these are reasons that estimates are bad, and probably, so they're not a good number. The price can be way higher or way lower. They're not terribly inclusive. They don't allow for competition, and the hospital gets a big data grab on the patient, their name, their birth date, their insurance plan, what the services they need, and what does the patient get? A piece of bad information. So we are for wiping that out. We want to obliterate the estimator tool, and we have some legislation in Congress that would help. What our goal right now is, we like the rule, the hospital price transparency rule, and its companion rule, the transparency and coverage rule, which requires insurance companies to post their prices. And ideally, although it's not happening yet because there's nothing ideal about this system, is the insurance rule and the hospital price transparency rules will mesh, and the prices they post will mesh and hold each other accountable. So we can know what the prices are with some certainty. So we're waiting for that to happen. These two different industries, their information, the way it's posted, is not yet compatible. But the estimator has to go away because we need patients to have access to all the prices to unleash the competition, to drive the cost down, and to empower patients and give them financial certainty.
So Marni, there's two laws on the books. Why aren't they being enforced?
Well, it's a pretty good question, Jim. I don't know. CMS is responsible for enforcing the hospital price transparency rule, and patient rights advocates has hired really terrific researchers, and twice a year, they put out a hospital compliance report, and they survey of the 6,000 hospitals, they survey 2,000 and randomly pick from every state and show where we are in terms of compliance. And they hold the hospital, their posted files up against the actual rule to find out that today, 3.5 years since the rule went into effect, 34.5% of hospitals are in compliance. So that's a lot that are not complying. And to date, the CMS has fined exactly 14 hospitals. Now, allegedly, they've sent out some warning letters, but their lame excuse is that they're not an enforcement agency. They're there to help hospitals do their job better and support hospitals, which is great. But meanwhile, Americans are suffering and struggling under burdensome medical debt and opacity that is preventing them from knowing prices. The transparency coverage rules, they unleashed a torrent of information, billions of data points and prices, and only the teeniest of pinheads could get into that information and make sense out of it. And there are people who are trying to do that, but they're deliberately making it difficult. So, there's obfuscation happening on a number of levels. With regard to compliance, this is compliance to a law that's not perfect. This is compliance saying that hospitals are posting a machine readable file and they are posting an estimator tool, which we hate, but it's still complying. But while some people have a different number of compliance, what they don't look at is you have to look at the machine readable files that the hospitals are posting, and you will see that a lot of them fill them with fields of zeros, fields with NAs, like not available, formulas. It's a percentage of Blue Cross minus SIGA, something like that. That's not helpful. So between the formulas and the blanks and the NAs and the incomplete information, the machine readable files are not in compliance, because we actually can find and compare that when we look at the transparency and coverage data, which we call the TIC data, we can find the prices. So we know that they are available. The hospitals just aren't posting them. So we're sussing all this out. We're bringing all this up. We have 2 hearings tomorrow. Tomorrow the 11th. We have 2 hearings and health committee hearings on the 11th. We keep reminding the senators of what's going on, and it's getting to a boiling point. We have some good legislation that is going to help close some of the loopholes that are in the existing law and hold hospitals and insurance companies accountable, so we can unleash the transparency and get the competition on them.
Well, thanks for enlightening about that, Marni. Now, you also brought up the thing is why employers need access to their claims data. Would you touch on that briefly?
Yes. So again, the data aren't at my fingertips, but as most of you realize, the cost of healthcare premiums are going up an exorbitant number, much higher than the rate of inflation. And there is a law, ERISA law requires employers to be good stewards of their employees' healthcare dollars. So when an employee is paying premium dollars to an employer, and the employer is just writing a big check to Blue Cross and doesn't really know how Blue Cross is spending it, that is not being a good steward, that is not being a good fiduciary of the healthcare spend. So, but meanwhile, it's been forever, insurance companies have shut out that access to data. When employers ask for their claims data, it's denied, it's redacted, they said it's private, you can't see it. But meanwhile, I'm paying you all these checks, but what am I paying for? So, someone in your company needs a knee replacement, they get it done and it's paid for by insurance, but you don't know how much it is. And you don't know if they're using your employees' dollars wisely. And there are now a couple of lawsuits underway where the employers are suing the insurance plans for that data, and they're winning these lawsuits. So it's very important for employers to be able to know. Oh, and there's also rumblings of class action suits from employees against their employers for not being better stewards of the money. So all of this is going to come down like a house of cards, because you can't just keep writing checks and sending them into the dark and having insurance plans say, sorry, we can't tell you how your money's being spent, just trust us, we're doing a good job. Meanwhile, the premiums keep going up, and co-pays keep going up, and deductibles keep going up. And we just need transparency to make sure that there is good, judicious spending on behalf of the employers, on behalf of their employees.
Before we go into our open discussion and stop the recording, Marni, any closing comments or summary to put all this together? You've given us a lot of information here.
I guess all I would say is I went into journalism because I wanted to do good for people. And I'm not some mercenary martyr, but I like waking up on the side of the angels. It's the right thing. It is the right thing to be as part of the solution, driving toward a cause that whenever I mention this to my friends, everyone's like, oh my gosh, they have a story like my brother, my sister, my husband, myself, all the nightmare they've experienced with regard to the bills. And everyone loves their doctor. Everyone loves their nurses. This is not about that. They love their hospitals, but they don't want to continue to. 54% of Americans avoid getting needed medical care because they fear the bill. That is just not a way to have good health outcomes and a healthy America. So I hope you'll join me in the solution and help pull back the curtain on prices and realize that we're not out to destroy hospitals. We're here to empower patients and make sure hospitals make a healthy profit, but correct some of the excesses and maybe take care of some of the middle players that are maybe helping themselves to a little bit more of their share of the healthcare dollar than they should.